Hi everyone, welcome to the daily editorial analysis of the Hindu newspaper. Today we shall discuss the important editorial of 15th December 2023. These are the article taken up for discussion. Let's discuss it one by one. Alright, let's dive into the first article, which is about those big climate meetings called COP. Back in 1995, these meetings were kind of dull, with only officials and tech people. But guess what? Now they're like a big carnival, with activists, businesses, and lots of media. Why? Because people are realizing how dangerous climate change is for all of us. So, folks around the world agree that climate change is a big deal. No more denying it. Everyone knows we need to do something about it. But here's the catch: even though everyone says we need to cut down on the stuff that makes the earth heat up, like fossil fuels, not everyone is acting super fast. Now, this part is a bit tricky. The author says that some countries are using climate science like a weapon. They blame other countries for causing climate problems, but don't want to help them out when things go wrong. It's like saying, you made the mess, but I won't help you clean it up. These COP meetings, they're often called historic when they promise to do something big, like cut down on emissions. But the author is saying, hold on. What about helping countries switch to cleaner ways? Why isn't that historic too? It's like promising to eat more veggies, but not actually buying any. So, the author is saying that future meetings should use science to be fair and help everyone, not just make fancy promises. Let's focus on justice, fairness, and helping each other out. Because, honestly, we need to get real about this climate change thing and start making some meaningful changes. Let's move on to the next article. COP28, many a slippery slope ahead. COP28 in Dubai was a really important meeting where countries got together to talk about how they're doing with the promises they made in the Paris Agreement. They were looking at everything like how much they're cutting down on pollution, how they're getting ready for climate changes, and who's helping out the countries that need it the most. Now, the scientists are saying we really need to keep the world from getting too much hotter. They're aiming for a limit of 1.5 degrees above how hot it was before we started messing with the environment. And guess what? We're already getting really close to that limit, and it's causing all these crazy weather things. Okay, here's the deal with fossil fuels, like coal and oil. They're the big culprits behind most of the pollution causing climate change. Surprisingly, this time, they were right at the center of the discussion at COP28, and it made a lot of people nervous because the guy leading the meeting is also in charge of a huge oil and gas company. The countries had these plans to cut down on how much pollution they're making. They wanted to reduce it by 43% by 2030 and a big 60% by 2035, aiming to have no pollution at all by 2050. But, oh boy, the first drafts of these plans weren't everyone's cup of tea, especially when it came to kicking the fossil fuels out of our lives. People weren't happy with the second draft of these plans. It was a bit wishy-washy, not saying much about getting rid of fossil fuels, and some countries weren't having it. Small islands, African countries, and even the European Union were like, hold on, we need more promises and money here. So, after a bit of drama, they came up with a compromise. They decided to transition away from fossil fuels, but they left some doors open. Terms like low-carbon fuels and carbon capture got thrown around, but they're a bit fuzzy on what they actually mean. Now, when it comes to money, the final plan didn't do a great job. They acknowledged that the rich countries promised $100 billion a year by 2020 to help out the developing ones, but guess what? That promise hasn't been kept. They talked about needing trillions of dollars for things like preparing for climate changes and using cleaner energy, but they didn't give solid numbers or new targets. The final meeting was a bit rushed. Some countries weren't even in the room when the decision was made. Imagine that. There were objections later, especially from small islands and Africa. They felt left out and had a long list of complaints. So, in the end, the COP28 meeting didn't solve many problems. It's like they just wrote down that they're going to try and use less fossil fuels, which, honestly, they were already doing. Nothing big got settled, no new money promises, no clear adaptation goals, and the fossil fuel folks seemed pretty happy. To sum it up, COP28 left a lot of things hanging. It's a bit disappointing because it looks like the rich countries and the big companies got away without doing much, and that's not great news for our planet. Let's hope they do better next time. Let's move on to the next article. Principled shift.
This article is about a significant shift in India's position on the conflict between Israel and Gaza. The article talks about India's decision to support a UN resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire, marking a change from its earlier stance. So, 2 months after Israel's military actions in Gaza, India joined a global call to stop the bombing by voting in favor of a UN resolution. This is a change from its previous decision to abstain from a similar resolution just a few weeks earlier. Why did India abstain before? Well, the government explained it as a matter of principle, part of India's zero-tolerance approach towards terrorism. The earlier resolution didn't explicitly condemn the terror attacks on October the 7th, which led to India choosing not to vote. Now, in the latest UN resolution on December the 12th, India voted in favor, even though it didn't directly mention the October 7 attacks. Why? There are a few possible reasons, such as the increasing casualties, Israel's actions going beyond their original mandate, and shifting global opinions.
The article highlights the rising death toll, extensive destruction, and growing international concern as factors influencing India's change in position. It also mentions the indiscriminate nature of Israel's attacks and the deviation from their initial mission. It's noted that Israel rejected the UNGA resolution, and now, India's role in ensuring the ceasefire is crucial. Earlier, India found itself somewhat isolated due to its abstention, but it seems to be responding to calls from Palestine and Gulf states. Is this a complete reversal of India's stance? The article suggests it might be too early to say. India's future position will depend on how actively it contributes to implementing and sustaining the ceasefire. The article encourages the Modi government to play a more vocal role in addressing the strategic challenges posed by the conflict. Given India's history of advocating for peace, the article suggests that the Modi government should actively contribute to resolving the conflict. It emphasizes the potential regional instability caused by Israel's actions and the importance of India's diplomatic involvement. Let's move on to the next article. Authenticity in the post-authentic world. In this article we're going to explore the idea of authenticity in our world, especially considering the influence of technology, AI, and social media. It's interesting to note that Merriam-Webster's word of the year for 2023 is authentic, showing that people are placing a greater emphasis on genuine expression. So, let's dive into this article that talks about what it means to be authentic in a world filled with technology. Alright, let's break down what authenticity really means. Is it about staying true to ourselves, avoiding fake stuff, or creating something entirely original? The article mentions that philosophers like Rousseau, Sartre, and Heidegger had different views on this. Nowadays, authenticity is tied up with celebrity culture, our identities, and the impact of social media and AI, which can create things like deep fakes. Now, the article suggests that technology, especially AI, has made it easier and quicker to produce and spread fake content. It asks a thought-provoking question. Did people like Donald Trump shape the post-truth world, or were they just products of it? The author points out that generative AI can create realistic content, from articles to paintings, raising concerns about how this technology might be misused. Our next point is about an infocalypse, a term coined by AI scientist Nina Schick. This is predicted to be the biggest crisis in information and communications in history. The line between mainstream and social media is getting blurry, like when there was fake news about Amartya Sen's passing. This kind of misinformation erodes our trust in what we see and hear. Now, let's talk about trust. The prevalence of fake news and AI-generated content is making it harder for us to trust information. There's this concept called the liar's dividend, where just by publicly doubting something, people can cast doubt on its authenticity, even if it's real. This is a big risk to society because it might lead us to question everything. In conclusion, the article talks about how it's becoming more and more difficult to tell what's true and what's not. The lines between right and wrong, love and hate, and war and peace are getting hazy. While technology may sparkle, it doesn't always contribute positively to trust in society. Despite these challenges, the article suggests that humans still desire authenticity in the future we can trust, even in a world that seems a bit dystopian. Let's move on to the next article. Is India doing enough to tackle climate change? Okay, so, in the recent COP28 meeting, which is like a big climate conference where countries get together, all 198 of them agreed to do something important. They decided that instead of just talking about getting rid of coal, they're going to move away from using all kinds of fossil fuels like oil and gas. This is a bit different from what they decided in the previous meeting, COP26. Now, our country, India, played a crucial role here. We were part of changing the words they used. Instead of saying phasing out coal, we supported saying phasing down, and we also said, let's transition away from oil and gas. It's like, we wanted to be clear about moving towards cleaner energy. So, there's this person, Harjit Singh, who's talking about the outcomes of COP28. They made something called the Loss and Damage Fund, which helps with problems caused by climate change. It was a big deal. And they also talked about moving away from fossil fuels in a fair way. Now, another person, Karthik Ganesan, is sharing thoughts. He's saying that we need to stop giving special benefits, subsidies to fossil fuels, and actually move away from using them. But he also thinks we need to do more. We, India, are a big player in making climate decisions, and we need to step up. They're also talking about money here. Developing countries, like us, might find it hard to do big things without enough money. It's like trying to build a cool project without the right funds. There's a worry about some solutions, like using technology to capture carbon. They think it might not be the best way to really reduce pollution. It's a bit like having a patch for a problem instead of fixing it from the root. Now, let's talk about India. We import a lot of fossil fuels, but we need to find a way to use cleaner energy. It's a challenge because our economy kinda depends on the money we make from fossil fuels, but we need to think long term. The article also talks about what's more important for us, making our economy bigger or taking care of our environment. It's like deciding if we want to grow our money or take care of our surroundings. It's saying that India is like a big brother. We need to help out smaller countries and show them how to do things better. But, at the same time, we need to fix our own issues first. Now, the Loss and Damage Fund. It's like a fund for helping out when things go wrong because of climate change. India needs to be part of this and contribute, not just in money, but also by sharing what we know. In the end, the article is saying that India needs to take care of its own problems, while also being a good leader in solving global climate issues. It's a bit like saying, let's clean up our backyard before we help clean up the whole neighborhood. Let's move on to the next article. Did COVID vaccination have a positive impact on mental health? There was this study in the UK looking at how people felt mentally before and after getting their COVID jabs. Turns out, mental health issues went up after the pandemic, but the ones who got vaccinated had fewer problems compared to those who didn't. Surviving COVID, especially the serious cases, can mess with your mental health for quite some time. Getting vaccinated seems to help lighten that mental load. Some smart minds studied 17 million people in the UK, from the time before vaccines to after they started rolling out. The folks who got their shots had fewer mental health issues like feeling down or anxious after dealing with COVID. People who got vaccinated had a better time mentally after dealing with COVID, no matter if they had mental health issues before. Seems like getting the vaccine made COVID less tough on their minds too. Unlike checking for a fever or something, checking mental health is a bit tricky. But in the UK, they have electronic records that help understand how people are feeling mentally. Mental health not only affects how you feel, but also how you get things done and even the economy. During the pandemic, companies had to spend more money because some employees weren't doing so well mentally. Poor mental health made people less productive at work, and some even quit their jobs during the pandemic. A study said this cost companies a lot of money. Getting vaccinated didn't just protect against COVID, it also made people less worried and sad, saving a lot of money too. But, interestingly, this mental health boost was only for those who got vaccinated. People who chose not to get vaccinated might have been a bit different. The ones who didn't get the jab usually had less education and faced more challenges in life. Those who didn't get vaccinated had it tougher: uncertain jobs, less money, and harder access to healthcare. Being treated differently because they weren't vaccinated might have slowed down their mental recovery too. Older folks and those with health issues got more mental health benefits from the vaccine. Younger people might not have been as worried about COVID, so they didn't feel the need to get vaccinated as much. Mental health issues are becoming a big reason for people getting disability benefits in the UK. If mental health problems stick around, it's tougher to find and keep a job. Kids had a hard time during the pandemic: no school, more screen time, and less time with friends. All this affected how they felt mentally. Working from home caused some family fights and more drinking for some. After too many Zoom meetings, some started feeling a bit weird about how they looked. Even though most vaccinated people felt better mentally, those with less education had a bit more stress and sadness. Maybe because some of them weren't sure about the vaccine or got wrong information. A recent study found that, overall, getting vaccinated helped people feel less down and anxious. But interestingly, those who had COVID before might feel more serious mental health symptoms after getting the jab. So, mental health during COVID was a big deal, often called the second pandemic. But the good news is, getting vaccinated seems to have made a big difference in how hard it hit people mentally. These are the important articles for the day. Hope you like our initiative. If you like this, kindly like the video, share it to the peer groups, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel. Thank you.